Hey, I'm Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker. Today on the Lawrence World War I Project, we remember Henry Mann. Henry Morris Mann was born in Boston, Massachusetts on October 7, 1898. His parents died when Henry was a young boy, and he was raised by his Uncle Daniel and his Aunt Bertha de Sorcy. Uncle Dan was a foreman for the Lawrence Gas Company, and they lived at 170 Parker Street. As a young man, he worked at the nearby Merrimack Boiler Works. And on the day that the United States entered the war, April 2, 1917, Mann enlisted in the Massachusetts National Guard. After finishing his training, he was assigned to the 103rd Field Artillery Unit of the 26th Yankee Division as part of the Sanitary Detachment. The detachment's responsibility included assisting the Medical Corps. His division left for France on October 9th. Soon, the 26th Division was engaged in 5 different fronts and offensives during 1918, and Mann was there for each of them. In a letter to his Aunt Bertha in October 1918, Mann described what he called the worst day of his life while his unit was fighting in the Meuse-Argonne offensive. Quote, "The old shells were coming in great shape, and the pieces flew around my head a little too much for yours truly," close quote, he wrote. Mann also told his aunt of the battlefield. Quote, "I took one look at the place, and then I knew I was up against the real thing in open warfare. Just imagine Stevens Hill in North Andover, all surrounded by hills, a little larger, perfectly bare of trees or bushes. The Germans sprayed the top of the hill with shrapnel and gas, but that didn't harm us any," close quote. Later, Mann wrote of a close call. He'd fallen asleep when another soldier asked him if he had just heard a shell. Quote, "I replied no. Before he had time to answer me, the Boche did. A nice big 105 landed with a screech behind us, sending a mess of rocks and sand on top of us. There were only 3 that landed close enough to do any damage, and we were hugging the ground so close that they didn't have a chance to get us. Fortunately, they let up after an hour and turned their attention to the fellows on the opposite hill. The inside of the Merrimack Boiler Works, when they're making the most noise they can, would seem like a peaceful country graveyard at midnight compared to that barrage." End quote. Unfortunately for Mann, he was severely injured not long after he sent that letter. He was rushed to a nearby base hospital through the end of the war on November 11th. However, he succumbed to his injuries on November 16. He was 20 years old and is buried in Saint-Mihiel American Cemetery in France. On July 8, 1940, the Lawrence City Council voted to name the bridge on Parker Street, adjacent to the Casey Bridge, as the Henry M. Mann Bridge. I'm Charlie Baker. Thank you for watching the Lawrence World War I Project.